Welcome to the Awesemo Early Bird Podcast. It's your old pal Emac coming to you with one Adam Ship My Money Share as we're going to talk some Thursday MLB baseball. We're already past hump day. We're coming into the home stretch here for the weekend. We've got the Kentucky Derby. There is golf happening. That starts very early on Thursday morning. For those of you listening to this when we post it Wednesday night, that's when we're recording it. But we have an oddly chopped up slate for Thursday. Very heavy on the early games. Now, the sites are all handling this differently, but there are 2 games at noon, 2 games at 1, a game at 2, a game at 4, a game at 8, and a game at 10. So I suspect we'll probably have one show in the evening. I don't think we'll actually go dark, but I don't know for sure because the main slate is 2 games, and it's at 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock. So we'll have to see. But you got basketball. DraftKings should put out a rolling 2-day slate for the first time, in about 3 years. So we'll have to see if they continue that. But that should be fun if they keep doing that because I don't mind the showdown slates, but I like to have a little bit more choice in my lineups. Adam, talk to me. What's going on? Any big trips planned for this weekend? Are you going to the Kentucky Derby?
I am not going to the Kentucky Derby. As of now, I have no trips planned until the middle of next month. So hopefully I find an excuse to go back to Nashville between now and then. But as of now, I don't have one.
All right. Well, let's jump on into the games here. We're going to hit these first 5. FanDuel is only playing the first 4. Yahoo, of course, does the full day slate. DraftKings is going 5. So we're going to kind of split the difference and go 5. You will have the DFS strategy show. That'll be at 9:15 on Thursday morning. You will get Josh Engelman and one Dave Alafi Loughran. And then you will get some version of something in the afternoon, I'm sure. But TBD on that. But in the meantime, let's jump on in here, Adam. Our first game, no weather issues for any of the games because, of course, Milwaukee Miller Park has the ability to have a retractable roof, or they do have a retractable roof, so they have the ability to cover themselves from any rain that's coming up. But we've got the San Diego Padres going against the Atlanta Braves, finishing out their series there in Atlanta. You've got Matt Strom going against Mike Fultonevich. Fulte, a little bit of a sore elbow issue, but Adam, this is the perfect lineup for him because there slates to be at least one lefty in Eric Hosmer and maybe a second lefty if Greg Garcia. I made some disparaging comments about him. Congrats on him getting his 11th career home run that day, Adam, because when we say bad things about people on the show, they do well. But talk to me here about the pitching. Fulte, I think, will be in our plans. Strom, not so sure. That's a tough lineup there for Atlanta, but we did see Josh Donaldson has been scratched the last couple games, so keep an eye on his availability. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I mean, still a tough Atlanta lineup for Strom, and he's not cheap either. But on the other side, I do like Fultonevich here. Like you said, it's a mostly right-handed lineup for the Padres. They do have a lot of power, but there are also strikeouts there. And since the start of last season, Fultonevich against righties, just a 260 expected WOBA, a 120 expected ISO. I like him quite a bit here against the Padres at a reasonable price tag. The problem is just that I'm not sure exactly how stretched out he is.
Yeah.
He has made – okay, he threw 78 pitches in his start against Colorado on the 27th, so he should be fine here.
Let me look. I'm going to look him up on the minor league stats if I can real quick. Let's see. What do you think? Baseball Reference. Because I thought he had 4 starts there in the minors. I remember talking with Spags, I think it was, about this on the show. So let's quickly get over there. And I'm never fast at this, but here we are. 2019 minor league batting. I don't think we want his batting. Where is minor league riveting stuff here? I know.
Yeah, I mean, he made it. Made last start in the majors, and he threw 70 pitches.
Yep. So he got this was his. He made 4 starts with Gannett, 56, 61, 85, 89, 78. So I think he's fully stretched out. Is what I wanted to say. I don't think we'll see him go over 90, but I think 80 is very much in play. 85 in this matchup. So. We only do have 8 choices on FanDuel, 10 on DK. So I just wanted to uncover that one. Looking for any of the hitters here in this game. I'm assuming you'll want Braves righties, and then of course Freddie Freeman, who is 400, 200 Woba and isolated power against fellow lefties. Those are the guys for you.
Yeah, especially Ronald Acuna. He's only $4,400 on DraftKings. That's a misprice. It wouldn't even really matter who he's facing. That would be appealing. And Strom is, nothing special. He's not bad. He's not great. So I really like Acuna at 4,400. Freeman's fine. Donaldson, if he's in the lineup, is fine. Albies and Camargo are both better from the right side of the plate, so they're appealing. It's we saw Swanson bat second on Wednesday. If Donaldson's out, I assume that we could see Swanson up there again. There's a lot of different ways to go with Atlanta, and they are reasonably priced and offer a lot of upside.
All right, you ready to move on to game number 2 here?
Yeah.
We have the Cincinnati Reds with Tyler Mahle going against the the Minnesota Mets. Goodness gracious. Now I almost said Milwaukee. Let's go with the New York Metropolitans. Nowhere near Milwaukee. Nowhere near Minnesota. But the Metropolitans here. 4.3 implied run total going against Tyler Mahle. It is Noah Syndergaard on the bump. Once again, I think every game this series, I think the Reds have had a sub-4 implied run total. It certainly feels that way. What do you like here with Syndergaard? Because he's going to be one of the more expensive options on our sites that have these earlier games. He is 45 on Yahoo. Shout out to Yahoo as one of the presenting sponsors of many things here on Osmo, including the Early Bird podcast. You've got Syndergaard as number 3 on FanDuel at 9,000, and then on DK he is number 2 at 9,400. Jose Barrios topping him on all 3 aforementioned sites. Where are you going to be approaching your Syndergaard love here?
I mean, I hate Syndergaard as a DFS player, but pitching is not really great, at least at the top on this slate. So I have no issues with getting there. You just run into the same issues that you always do with him. He doesn't have good command. He leaves the ball over the plate, and then he runs into BABIP issues because he has no command and he leaves the ball over the plate, and guys are able to just flip it into the outfield because it's elevated right down the middle. Strikeout stuff obviously is good. The Reds have a lot of guys who are good at putting the ball in play, which is another potential issue for Syndergaard. The Reds have a lot of speed, which is a huge issue for Syndergaard if anyone gets on base. So he's kind of like the best of a group of not great options. But assuming he's going to be the highest owned out of the group, I would have no problem taking a chance on like a Barrios against Houston, who has the same ceiling in a really tough matchup, but a really high ceiling. Charlie Morton against Kansas City, or saving a little bit of money going down somewhere else and just being able to afford whatever bats you want.
Do you know of the projected starters here? Puig, Peraza are the 2 that I found, and I'm going player by player. But those are the only 2 I found that have stolen bases so far this season.
That's it?
That's it. I would have figured Votto and Suarez would have 1 or 2 apiece.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, just throwing it out there. If you're going to get one, oh God, who did I see in the last time Syndergaard won? I forget who it was, but it was like Ryan Zimmerman or something along those lines, where you're like, yep, that's the one time he's going to run this season. He got a stolen base and he's done.
Yep.
So
Jose Peraza, if you're not playing Syndergaard, Jose Peraza is a really good value option.
Yeah. That's a funny one. On the other side here, going against Mahle, you've got Robinson Cano, who is should be back and good. As far as I can tell, he had gotten hit by his hand on a pitch. But you've got
Wednesday.
Pardon?
He played on Wednesday.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. But you've got Jeff McNeil, Cano, Conforto, Nimmo, all coming from the left side of the plate. Coming from the right side, you got Pete Alonso, and depending on if he's going to play on this early game, Wilson Ramos. So relatively formidable lineup here, even though it's a better ballpark for Tyler Mahle. It's not the easiest of matchups, and we haven't been able to say that about the Mets collectively in a couple seasons here from a hitting perspective. But Mahle is 5,900 on DraftKings. We're going to need 2 pitchers here. There's a 4.3 implied run total, and we've got for the Mets, and we've got this 12-10 game. It's going to be 75 degrees. Thoughts here on Mahle as your discount dandy, as your SP2?
I'm not looking to really get there. I would much rather get 2 Mets lefties here. So Mahle gives up a ton of power at home in Cincinnati. Obviously, we're in New York, so that's not as much of an issue, but still plenty of power to lefties. It's just not as obscene as it is in Cincinnati. And you have left-handed power in this lineup, and it's reasonably priced. I mean, Robinson Cano is 4K on DraftKings. Brandon Nimmo's 3,900, Jeff McNeil's 4,300, Conforto at 4,700 is the most expensive hitter in the lineup outside of Pete Alonso. But that's still not really that expensive of a price tag for this spot. Since the start of last season, Tyler Mahle's thrown 1,303 pitches to left-handed hitters. He's allowed a 219 expected ISO and a 378 expected WOBA. I think that whether you're stacking the Mets or just taking, one or two of these guys at a time, there's a lot of power upside here. And unless we get a right-handed heavy lineup for some reason, I don't really want to get to Tyler Mahle.
Yeah, I'm just looking here. I don't see a reason unless somebody gets dinged up, it's hard to see one of those guys sitting, other than it's a noon game after playing on Wednesday. Moving along to game number 3 here. It's the Colorado Rockies wrapping up their series in Milwaukee. They will be facing Freddie Peralta, who should be coming off the injured list to make this start. On the other side, we have Jon Gray. We do like some of the pitchers for the Rockies when they're outside of Coors Field. Miller Park is still hitting friendly, and this is a tough, dangerous lineup. But the bottom half is potentially weak there with Ben Gamel and Orlando Arcia as our projected guys in here. I still don't really want to tangle with the Brewers, Adam, but we do only have 10 pitchers to choose from here on DK. What are your thoughts starting off with Blackmon? But then we got to turn around and go to Peralta and his one pitch.
So you said with Blackmon?
Sorry, Gray. I was looking at who I thought was leading off, and I didn't look up far enough. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm willing to take a chance on Gray just because of the slate size and the price tag. At the top, I already said my issues with Syndergaard. He's fine, but he's probably going to be more popular than I would want. Barrios has the tough matchup. Morton, I think, is a good play. But in that mid-range, like you have Fultonevich, Jon Gray is just a more talented pitcher than $8,000, especially outside of Coors. It's obviously a tough matchup, but no Yelich. You get more strikeouts from Thames. Grandal may be out of the lineup because it's a day game after a night game. That would be a boost for Gray. You can get Arcia, you can get Gamel out. So it's not as good a lineup as normal from Milwaukee. And Gray is a good pitcher that can get out pretty much anyone if he's on. So I'll take some chances on him at a reasonable price tag. And then on the other side with Peralta, he is making his first start back from the injured list, missed 2.5 weeks. So not really sure what to expect from him, but he wasn't great outside of one start through his first 4. So it's an appealing matchup against the Rockies, but I think there's a few too many question marks for me to want to get to Peralta here.
Yeah, and I can't do it myself. Just looking at four home runs in his last 2 starts, made 3 in the 3rd inning in both of them, through 92 and then 64 pitches. The 2 starts prior to that, 100 pitches, and then first game of the season he threw 80. So theoretically he's stretched out, but he doesn't have the pitch mix, in my opinion, that I think we want to see from someone that's going to survive a second, let alone a third time through a lineup here, Adam.
He's got like 3 or 4 different pitches.
Why? Then what is the problem with him, do you think? Just more out of curiosity here.
You mean like why did he struggle in 3 starts this year?
Well,
I mean, what do you like? What do you mean? What's the problem?
Yes. Why did he? Damn it! He came out of the gate strong with 13 strikeouts in Coors Field his first time out. I want to replicate that. No, but in all seriousness, though, he seems to be a guy that's usually flirting with 5 figures on DraftKings. Has not really come anywhere near that, seemingly more often than not, in my humblest of recollections here. I've been disappointed. I mean, he had the monster where he had 43 fantasy points there, 11 strikeouts in 8 innings, allowed no runs, 2 base runners, just killed Cincinnati, and he's negative in the other 3 combined. That's just...
Yeah, I mean, he walks a lot of guys. He struggles with his control. That gets him in trouble. The strikeout stuff is still there even this season. But, I mean, he finished last season with a close to 30% strikeout percentage and a xFIP at 4.33, which isn't great. But, again, a lot of walks. He walked 4.6 per 9 last year. He's at 3.6 so far this year. So I think it's a control and command thing. But I don't worry too much about his pitches just because, it's listed as a fastball, but it moves in whatever direction he wants it to.
Okay. Good to know. My personal bias is taking over. So this is why it's good to talk through this stuff and listen to sharp guys like you and Laffy. It's important. It's important. Let's see. In this lineup or in this matchup, any bats you want to highlight there in addition to what you mentioned at the beginning?
Colorado's price tags really came down for this matchup. Charlie Blackmon was $5,200 or $5,300 on Wednesday against what was supposed to be Chase Anderson, ended up not. But he's down to 4,600, so that's a pretty appealing price drop for him. Obviously these guys are better in cores, but nobody is more expensive than $5,000. Trevor Story is obviously really good. I think it's a spot where I'm more interested in full stacking Colorado than getting one-offs, just because when Peralta does struggle, like if Peralta's bad, he's probably going to be really bad because, he's coming back from the injury. He already has trouble throwing strikes. He's not someone that I expect to, very often have a good game, except get touched up by like a couple of guys. I expect him to either, to be very polarized one direction or the other.
All right, moving along here, we've got two more games. This one is in Minnesota. We've got first pitch temperature at 53 degrees. Houston Astros going against the Twins. Astros with a 4.4 implied run total. Twins with 4.2. We've got Brad Peacock on the mound for Houston. You've got righty Jose Berrios going for the Twins. I'm not liking either of the pitchers here. We've seen a much improved Twins offense. They don't strike out as much. Now they're without Willens Astudillo, but they also don't have Cano and some of their other free swingers. So that's not really going to be helpful to Peacock. He's not always the biggest strikeout guy in the world, but there's less than normal. We on the other side have Berrios, who is no slouch. I don't know that it's fair to either one of them, but I kind of consider him like a Freddie Peralta in that he lets me down more often than I would like. However, he is pretty damn talented. I just don't want to tangle with Houston. So that's the hard part for me is I've kind of crossed off, three pitchers here, which is it's a little bit dangerous, Adam, when we only have 10 to choose from. Talk to me. Let's start off with the pitchers here. Anybody that you feel at least more than tepid with?
I like Berrios a lot in tournaments.
Okay.
And the reason is just because, like I said earlier, there's question marks on most pitchers on the slate. And Berrios, looking at DraftKings pricing, he's $9,900. So he's $500 more than Syndergaard. He's facing the Astros. The Astros' implied run total is about a full run higher than the Reds. People are just not going to play Berrios over Syndergaard. They're not going to play Berrios over Morton, I wouldn't think. And he has really, really good stuff. He's still not super consistent, but he has also been much, much better at home throughout his career for whatever reason. I don't put too much stock into that just because I don't have a reason for it, but they've held for 2.5 seasons now, and it's more so just about the upside in tournaments you get from Berrios. He probably is not going to project as well as Syndergaard, just in raw projections, but when you factor in that he can still reach his ceiling at a very high, his ceiling is very high, and he should be a lot lower owned than Syndergaard. I think he's actually a pretty appealing tournament option.
All right. That makes sense. And a lot of this is about leverage, and that's one of the things I think we can all learn from, particularly when we watch the DFS strategy show there. 6 days a week that runs, and then, of course, we do have a show on Sunday as well, sort of a combination DFS strategy / live before lock there for baseball. But it was interesting. I caught the tail end of Josh's show today, and he was on with Spags, and Josh was basically saying he's this year he's going everything off leverage and off of what the masses are doing, and he says he's running it this way for an entire season, and he wants to see how it's going to bear out in the numbers to see if this is an interesting way to go. That was point one that he made, and point two, he was talking about how a lot of players, general gamers don't necessarily go to the 7, 8, 9 hitters nearly as often, or outright just don't have them in their player pool effectively. And that what he said is another way that he thinks he's getting somewhat of, I don't know that edge is the best way to say it, but leverage at least on the field, because it doesn't take very many if those guys are only going to be in the 2, 3, 4, 5%, unless there's an obvious guy like a cheap catcher or somebody gets bounced in the order and they're actually in a good spot. But more often than not, those guys are kind of afterthoughts. Have you given much thought to that? Because I know you're doing things a little bit differently this year than you have in the past.
Yeah, I factor leveraging in when I decide what lineups I'm going to play.
And that I think is rather important on these small slates. Have you found any sort of sweet spot thus far? I know we're only it's about 33 full days into the season here for baseball, somewhere around those. Have you found a certain size slate seemingly better or worse for what you're trying to do, or is it still a little too early to tell?
Yeah, I mean, it's too early to tell. Like my biggest win so far this year was on a 5 or a 6 game slate, but I've come close on bigger slates too. So I don't think that has a huge impact. I mean, it does obviously ownership gets more concentrated. So if you're leveraging against a pitcher and that pitcher implodes, you knocked out a higher percentage of the field. But you know, outside of that, I don't think it matters all that much.
All right. Anything else you want to mention on this one? Any Twins batters that intrigue you? Perhaps a Nelson Cruz and Eddie Rosario.
Have some interest in the lefties against Peacock. That is, when he does struggle, it's almost entirely with lefties, and the Twins do have 3 good ones at the top with Kepler, Polanco, and Rosario. So I think those guys are all interesting options. And then you also get a really, really cheap Marwan Gonzales. He's obviously not the best hitter, but he's really, really cheap. So going to some lefties from Minnesota is kind of makes sense to me.
It does seem sometimes that when Marwin's at bat, he's holding the bat upside down. Just throwing it out there. Just saying. Getting to our last game here, our final one. We have the Tampa Bay Rays in Kansas City taking on the Royals. You have Charlie Morton going against the Royals, who have been sort of a fun team to pick on from time to time, but we are paying full price here for Mr. Morton. On the other side, you've got Danny Duffy at 6,400 going against a reasonably improved Tampa Bay offense, but they have some of their better players are swinging the stick from the left side of the plate, and they are without Wendell. They are out without Joey Wendell, who is on the DL. But I see they've called up Nathaniel Lowe to go against Brandon Lau. How is that working? They've got 2 guys with the same last name, and they pronounce it differently.
Yeah, I was telling Josh that I remember when Brandon Lau first got called up last year, because I believe it was against the Orioles. If not, I was just randomly watching the game. But they said that another of their best hitting prospects was named Lowe and spelled the same way as Lau, and that Lau had said that Brandon Lau had said that by the time Nate Lowe got to the major leagues, the common pronunciation of their name would be Lau.
Oh, that's a nice shade to throw in there. So, all right. Well, and he gets to lead off. So I guess that's what we'll be hearing first on the broadcast and in the stadium. But I just found that pretty funny, because there's always goofy stuff going on with names here. Usually it's pitchers with guys named Gray, multiple guys named Gray on the same day, or Lopez, or random stuff like that. But yeah, the 2 guys was interesting. Now, what's the hardware store you go to? Lowe's,
yeah.
Just saying. But looking at the pitchers here, reining myself back in as we wrap up our little podcast here, get everybody safely on their way to work for their Thursday morning commute. Morton, you mentioned that you thought was intriguing. Let's start off with Duffy, though. Is he in contention as an SP2 here for some savings?
Not as someone that I want to roster. Like if I can not roster him, I'll be very happy. But I imagine I'll get some, just because, he's like Tyler Mahle to me. I don't want to get him. I'm sure I'll get a little bit of Tyler Mahle because he's cheap, and same goes for Duffy. He didn't get any swings and misses in his last start, like 4.7% swinging strike rate. But that was against the Angels, who don't really swing and miss against anyone. His fastball velocity was around 92 miles an hour. I prefer Duffy when he's throwing like 94, but he did get, he still had good movement on his fastball. He had good movement on his curveball. He's always kind of an enigmatic pitcher where he seems like he puts it together and then he completely falls off. It is a dangerous matchup against Tampa. One thing working in his favor is that Lau and Choi are both left-handed. So 2 of Tampa Bay's more dangerous hitters don't have the platoon advantage, but he'll still have to deal with right-handed power like Pham, like Garcia, like Zunino. Yandy Diaz can do some damage as well. So it's definitely a scary matchup. It's not like I'm going out to target Duffy. I would like to have most of my lineups be some combination of Gray, Fulte, Berrios, and Morton. And I guess
what I found on some of these smaller slates, 5 it's not quite the same. But when you get down to 4 or 3, sometimes you're just picking up 5 or 10% of one of the pitchers that you really don't want just to make your various stack rules work.
Right.
And as we like to say, a home run is about the same as a good outing from some of these crappy guys, and 2 home runs is probably going to top darn near every pitcher on a slate that size. So generally you want to lean a little bit more towards the hitters in those situations. Any final thoughts for our slate?
It's a 5-gamer with some pretty questionable pitching. So it's the perfect example of a slate where ownership's going to be concentrated somewhere, because it pretty much always is, because people use projections and there's only 10 teams to choose from. But you really should not be afraid to be different, because that's how you win top heavy tournaments.
Indeed. And as we saw tonight, hey, Max Scherzer, bad calls you mentioned to me before we started broadcasting, and all of a sudden he has 3 earned runs that weren't really his fault. Funny things happen in sports. It's why they play these. Just ask the Houston Rockets, because they documented all the funny things that happened and sent it to the league. We'll get into more on that at a different time. But with that, gamers, check us out if you haven't signed up yet for Awesome. We'll use the promo code EARLYBIRD, all one word, to get 50% off any 1-month package. And that is a good deal. We also have week-long packages, so you can come in and try it out. Both those come with the Slack, the premium Slack. You can use the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. That is a premium that you will add on, but it's still a lesser cost from us than if you were getting it from Fantasy Cruncher, because they know that we support it and definitely help everybody out when they're trying to learn it. And that's one of the things that Slack is incredibly valuable for. Adam, you've done a few nice sessions there for office hours talking about baseball and how to use Fantasy Cruncher. And I saw a few people thanking you this morning from your last office hours adventure. I think you've got some more converts behind the paywall.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, if you come in and, you have an idea of what questions to ask and what you're trying to get better at or what you want to answer it, I think it's definitely a valuable way to quickly improve your process, kind of being able to take advantage of some stuff that, me or Josh or Lofty or whoever had to figure out over time.
Absolutely. That's what I always say. If I can save you guys from stepping in a few bear traps that I've stepped in, more power. You'll still find your own that you're going to step in, but if we can help you avoid any, it's definitely worthwhile. With that, gamers, you can follow Adam at ShipMyMoneyDFS on Twitter. I am at EMACDFS. Just hit 10,000, Adam. It was
there you go.
It was like Twitter had a confluence to get me 10,000 on my birthday, and then DK said, we're going to one-up that, and I took home $2,500 last night. Good times. Happy birthday to me. You can follow me at EMACDFS, and of course, it is Osmo_COM. Good luck, gamers.